Hello my friends, welcome to my channel, Lindy's Magpie Reads. This is a place where I talk about books. And I've been reading a lot. I'm still getting over COVID, so I haven't gone rowing for 2 weeks. Gives me more time to read. I finished 8 books in the last week, so I will be telling you all about those. Before I get to them, though, I just want to say thank you to everybody who has contributed to this project that Jolene over at Bookworm Adventure Girl and I have been doing, putting together a list of the best 21st century Canadian books. So we have recorded the results. Jolene is hard at work editing that video, and we expect it to be up this weekend, so watch for it. Very, very exciting. If you want to know some good Canadian books to read, we have many suggestions thanks to Canadian booktubers and Canadian readers and other people around the world who read Canadian books who have contributed to this. So it's very, very exciting. So as it happens, all 8 of the books that I'm going to tell you about today are written by Canadian authors. So an all-Canadian Friday Reads for you today. And this first book is a collection of poetry, Phantompains by Therese Estacion. She's a Filipina Canadian writer. She was 10 when her family moved to Canada. And this is a memoir type collection of poetry. What she's writing about is her experience with a very rare bacteria, Fusobacterium necrophorum. Only 2.9 people out of 1 million get this, and it's almost always fatal. Only 20% of people survive. She survived. She did have to lose both legs below the knee and some of her fingers and her reproductive organs. So quite an ordeal. And that's what she writes about in here. The epigraph for every section within this kind of documents her experience. And here's an example of one of those. Got sick. Body was once strong and capable, a machine. Body regressed, state of infancy. I found these poems so moving. Things like not being able to pee for a week. The description of Phantompains and what that's like. Just an excellent collection of poetry. There are also lots of figures drawn from mythology of the Philippines. So there's a smoke ogre, there's the white lady, a ghost, a baby vampire, these sort of flat-nosed little gnome creatures, a merman, creatures like that. And also Visayan vocabulary, too, from her home in Cebu, where she's from. Now, I picked this up because of the Canlit project that we did. So I think a couple of people had mentioned it as their favorite Canadian book. And right around the same time, CBC Books came out with a 30 Canadian writers to watch, something like that. I will include a link to that article down below, but Therese Estacion was one of the writers on that list. And speaking of mythology, this next book, A Dream Wants Waking by Lydia Qua, it features a central character who's half human, half fox spirit. So this character is called Yin He, or The Unknown Wayfarer. So it's a work of kind of combination historical fiction and science fiction and fantasy. Lydia grew up in Singapore, moved to Canada in 1980 to go to university, and she's still here. She's a queer author. All of her books have queer content, and this one is connected to her duology, that is The Walking Boy and Oracle Bone. So there are some characters that overlap, but this one definitely stands on its own, and those books are set back in 7th and 8th century China, and this one has those time periods. It has other timelines as well, into that 10th century in China, 19th century or 20th century, and then the majority of it is 23rd century Hong Kong. So we've got a demon, Gui, who traverses these timelines, as does the fox spirit. And there are genetically engineered beings. There's a massive brain that kind of controls the infrastructure in this future Hong Kong. Storytelling is an important aspect of life in this future timeline, and it's a complex, very engaging novel that I do recommend. If you like Larissa Lai, her When Foxes a Thousand, or Saltfish Girl, or Tiger Flu, then yeah, this is for you as well. Next, I have something that I listened to in audio, again by Chinese-Canadian writer Edward Y.C. Lee, and it's called The Laundryman's Boy. This one is straight historical fiction. It's set back in 1913 in St. Catharines, Ontario, and we have 13-year-old Hoi Wing Wu, who has been sent by his father from China to work in a laundry and expected to send his earnings back home to support his family. So he's working 16 hours a day in this laundry, and what he really wants is to go to school. The historical situation in Canada at that time was very anti-Asian. There was a head tax on any Chinese immigrants, $500 a person, which was like about 2 years of salary. And it was only people from China who had to pay this, no other immigrants. In fact, other immigrants to Canada were being supported by the government, encouraged to come. And that head tax was in effect until, I think, 1923. And at that time, the Chinese Exclusionary Act went into effect, where no immigration from China was allowed at all until 1947. So there were a lot of Chinese men, bachelors, who were in Canada because they weren't able to bring their wives or their families here. So all of that is just to give you some context for what's going on. This is just in the lead up to World War I, and it's a very engaging coming of age story that I heard about on Sean Breathe's Books channel. He had the author, Edward Y.C. Lee, as a mystery guest. So I will link that episode down below in the description box. And next up, another Chinese-Canadian author, Rosena Fung, and her book, Age 16. It is in graphic novel format, It is fiction, but it is based on the author's own experience and her mother and grandmother. So we have 3 generations starting out in Guangdong in China in 1954 when her grandmother was 16 and sent to Hong Kong to marry. Then we have Rosalind's mother, Lydia, in Hong Kong in 1972. She is a large girl. She and her mother are at odds with each other, and then the third timeline is Rosalind in the year 2000 in Toronto, again always at odds with her mother. Both Rosalind and her mother are much larger than societal expectations for women, and especially Chinese women, and the intergenerational trauma that's tied to beauty standards and cultural expectations, gender norms, all of that, as well as all 3 of them rebelling against what's expected of them. Rosena Fung uses different colors, so it's always clear which timeline that we're in. And one of them is the orange of 1972 in Hong Kong. Regardless of which timeline it is always complicated to be 16 years old. I really, really enjoyed this. I also enjoyed Rosena Fung's earlier graphic novel that was about mental health issues, that was aimed at a middle grade audience, and that was called Living with Viola. This one is suitable for teens and up. Next is another audiobook. It's called Our Crumbling Foundations: How We Solve Canada's Housing Crisis. And it's by Gregor Craigie, who is a CBC, I think radio and TV journalist. He reads his own audiobook. Got a great voice. It's pretty much what it says in the title. It's about Canada's housing crisis. I took some notes. For example, the Royal Bank in 2022 estimated that the share of household income that was needed to cover the ownership cost of an average home had risen to 62.7%, which was an all-time high. In Toronto, the average house cost 85.2% of pre-tax income, and in Vancouver, it was 95.8%. The price for a detached house in Vancouver in 2001 was about $345,000. By January 2021, so 20 years later, that price had jumped to $1,576,000, which is an increase of more than 350%. I learned about 3D printed houses. The walls are made using a kind of Portland cement called labacrete, which is an inexpensive way of building, and yet it's really strong and doesn't have waste materials that you do with the typical construction with lumber. Craigie goes around the world to places like Tokyo and London and Mexico to look at ways that housing is being addressed in those places, and then suggests a whole bunch of different ways that Canada can address the housing crisis here. That it made me really, really glad that we found this house that we did, that we can afford here in Victoria. So at the end, there are more than 30 recommendations that Craigie gives on multiple approaches to this problem. I think it's people in government that really are the ones who need to read this, but still, as citizens, we can support these initiatives. So, for example, the elimination of private family dwelling zoning, in cities across Canada, that sort of thing. Not objecting when multifamily units are built, because we need them. We need homes. Next, I have another graphic novel. It's called The Gulf, and it's by Adam de Souza. This is set in Vancouver. It's during the time of flip phones, and it is about a group of friends who are just finishing high school, and one of them has a dream to run away to one of the Gulf Islands where there is a commune, and she is so disillusioned with the adult world and also afraid of entering adulthood. There's a certain amount of ennui as well, of that age, as you finish high school and not thinking that university is not for you, that the solution she sees is living on a commune where being as little of a consumer as possible, working cooperatively, and that's her dream. And so together with a couple of her friends, they head off on this adventure. You can see it's an oversized graphic novel. That's what the artwork is like inside. I was totally wrapped up in their adventure. Yes, and I have to say it brought to mind my own youth. It was my dream when I was a teenager to join a commune, so I could identify so much with these kids. Yeah, loved it. And next, Bad Houses, a collection of stories by John Elizabeth Stintzi, who is a trans, non-binary writer. They write weird stuff. So their previous novel, My Volcano, was outstanding. And I was so excited about this short story collection that I pre-ordered it. It wasn't supposed to be out until September, so I was really surprised that I got a call from the bookstore last week to say it was in. Anyway, I didn't like it quite as well as My Volcano, but I did enjoy these stories. One of them I had encountered in an anthology called Queer Little Nightmares. I'm pretty sure that's where I encountered it. I don't have that anthology anymore to double check, but it was one that was edited by David Lee and Daniel Zamparelli. So there are, there's definitely queer content in these stories and so much weirdness. For example, there is a literal elephant in the room when a relationship breaks down. There are little green trolls that are the mistreated farm laborers at a farm. There's a house that follows a character around the world. It's a house that has lizard-like legs and toenails painted with glitter polish, and the woman who lives there is Barbara Yaga. There's a vaccine for the Ebola virus that cures people, except that it makes them grow wings. The last story is a long one. It's about 70 pages. Most of the other stories are, something like 10 or 20 pages. But the last one, Foundations, I think might be my favorite. In that one, the main character is a sculptor. She works with rebar and using that as lightning conductors. And there's a house that moves around in that story as well. It's kind of a Frankenstein house. That's all I'll say about it. So, quite fun. Bad houses. If anything I've said piques your interest, do look for it. And last up is Wild Houses. So from bad houses to wild houses. This one is by Colin Barrett, who is an Irish Canadian. He was born in Fort McMurray and lived in Toronto before his family moved back to Ireland, where Wild Houses is set. So it's set in County Mayo, the west side of Ireland, in small town Ballina. The audiobook is read by Damian Gildea, so the soft Irish accent and Irish vocabulary that's in there. Oof, what a delight to hear it in audiobook format. It's a story of small-time crime, small-time thugs. The central character, Dev, is a young man whose mother has recently died. So now he's living alone in their house out in the country. And he gets manipulated by these thugs. I don't want to tell you any more about the situation. It's just that there's criminal element there. But Dev gets panic attacks, and the way that mental health is handled in here is just superb. It's very much a character-focused novel, and I really cared for Dev very much, and some of the other young people, one in particular, a young woman who's also a central character. You can't pick your family, but you can choose how you behave. This book is on the long list for the Booker Prize, and I won't be surprised if it also is on prize lists in Canada as well. Yeah, loved it. So that's all I have got for you today. Thank you so very much for watching. I always appreciate hearing from you, so please say hello in the comments down below. Let me know if you have read any of these or you want to read any of these. And do stay tuned for our results video of the top Canadian books of the 21st century. It's a long one and chock full of great stuff. I wish you happy reading, all the great books out there. I'll see you all soon. Bye for now.